Hello, students. How are you all doing? Yes, so I hope everybody is having a good day so far. How is the preparation for exams going on? Is it going good? Wonderful. So it's really great and fantastic to have all of you in today's session. A very warm welcome to all of you to an exciting class today. This is Pratibha and I'm going to be your teacher for today's discussion. So today's discussion will be the concept of how do organisms reproduce and what are the exact topic of discussion. What are the topics that we are going to cover in today's discussion will be the introduction to the concept of reproduction, followed by the types of reproduction, and then we shall be understanding about the modes of reproduction being used by single cellular organisms or the single organisms, nothing but not involving both the partners, only the single organism. So we shall be understanding about activities, and yes, asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction will be two kinds of reproduction, right? So first part of discussion will be about asexual reproduction. Then later on, we will be understanding about sexual reproduction, which is involving two parents, and sexual reproduction within flowering plants, reproduction with respect to the human beings. In human beings, how the maturation occurs, what is the age or what is the period of adolescence and puberty. We shall be understanding this, followed by the male and the female reproductive systems, and we will be having a discussion about the reproductive health, and there will be a conclusion of today's discussion. So this is our overall agenda for today's discussion. Okay, so let's get started with the concept over here, that is the concept of reproduction. So what is the meaning of reproduction if we wanted to define it in a simple terms? How we are gonna state it? The concept of reproduction. Yes, so the concept of reproduction, it is nothing but the term itself is indicating reproduce. Okay, so the offspring is being getting produced from the parent, and this reproduction, it is a biological process. It is a biological process where the living organisms are producing the own individuals, their new individuals, and particularly of their own kind. Like a dog produces a puppy, the small cute little dog. Of course it is not going to produce a cat, right? So of their own kind, the living organisms are producing their offsprings, the individuals. So what does this ensure? It ensures that there is a continuity of the species. So from one generation to the next generation, overall the generations should be there for the sustenance, for the survival, for the existence of that particular species on the earth. Definitely the reproduction will be playing a really very important role. Okay, so now moving on, let's understand the types of reproduction. Okay, so types of reproduction will be of two major categories. One is the asexual reproduction, second one is the sexual reproduction. Okay, so asexual reproduction, what does that involve? Asexual, the term represent involvement of single parent, okay, only one parent, and there is no male and female gametes being formed. When there is no male and female gametes, there is no fusion, there is no fertilization as well. So there is no gamete formation over here, there is no fertilization, and it is involving only one single parent. So one single parent gives rise to a newer individual of their own kind. Now what about the sexual reproduction on the other hand? There is a formation of the gametes. Two parents are being involved over here. So two individuals being involved. Formation of the male and female gametes. From the male parent, we are going to get the male gamete. From the female parent, there is a production of the female gamete. So when the male and the female gametes are getting fused together, there is a fertilization happening. So fertilization happens with respect to the sexual reproduction. After fertilization, there will be zygote formation. Zygote develops into embryo, and if it is a human, the embryo develops into fetal stages and a baby is born after 9 months, right? So the types of reproduction where there is involvement of single parent or two parents. Single parent corresponds for the asexual reproduction and two parents corresponds for the sexual reproduction. Okay. So now let's get started with one after the other. Let's see regarding the asexual reproduction. So what we have known, asexual reproduction is the one which is involving only one single parent. And is there any gamete formation over here? There is no gamete formation, no fusion or no fertilization. Because of which, since there is no involvement of two parents, since the single parent is being involved, because of this, the offspring produced will be identical to that of the parent, and particularly it is genetically identical, and there is very less or sometimes zero chances of variations to occur. So the asexual reproduction, it is of many types. You know, we have a lot number of living organisms on our planet Earth. Not every organism follows the same mode, right? So there will be variation with respect to the production of the offspring of their own kind. So that is what we are going to discuss now. First, we shall be understanding regarding the asexual reproduction. We shall be understanding the modes of reproduction by the single organisms. So how many we have? A total over here we have the fission, fragmentation, regeneration, budding, spore formation and vegetative propagation. So as per our academic criteria, we have six requirements, six asexual reproduction, the modes of reproduction using a single organisms. Okay, so let me reiterate the points once again. The mode of asexual reproduction involving fission. Fission, it is of two kinds. If it is giving two daughter cells equally, we can say the binary fission. If it is employing multiple daughter cells, the multiple fission. Okay, so we can say the fission, the fragmentation will be there, followed by we can see the regeneration, budding, spore formation and vegetative propagation. This seems to be interesting, na? Very interesting. Yes. So now let's move on and now let's try to understand about the asexual reproduction and how this is happening. So first process is the process of fission. We can say with respect to unicellular organisms, the reproduction, it is happening with the help of cell division. So here what happens? One cell is dividing and it is forming new individuals of their own kind. So what we can conclude for the fission process to be, it is simple process of cell division where only one parent is being involved and it is dividing for the creation of newer individuals. Let's take few examples over here. Okay, so bacteria and protozoa. If you could take the examples of bacteria and protozoa, the cell will be there, right? The cell is going to split and it is going to give two equal parts. So there is a production of two equal parts, whereas in certain other living organisms, if you take the amoeba, okay, so the cell is having irregular shape. Amoeba is somewhat like this, right? Irregular shape. So how the cell division can happen? The cell can divide in any direction or in any plane. It's not having a particular direction. Whereas we have leishmania. Leishmania has whip-like structure where the cell division occurs, where the division occurs through that particular part. So fission. Fission is where the particular parent, single parent, it is dividing and it is giving. In binary fission, it will be two daughter cells, and if it is a multiple fission, it will be more than two daughter cells, right? So the parent organism is dividing into either two or more daughter cells, two or more new organisms are getting produced. So in case of amoeba, we can see the binary fission. In case of plasmodium parasite, we can see the multiple fission. So this is the binary fission in amoeba. The parent amoeba in any direction, in any plane, it can just divide. It is undergoing a cell division. So eventually the nuclear breakdown, the cytoplasmic breakdown will be there. and two daughter amoeba will be being produced. Since it is producing two daughter amoeba, we are going to call it under the binary fission. Okay, and now let's compare the normal amoeba as well as the amoeba which is being involved in the binary fission. So what is the point of comparison over here? What we are comparing over here in this activity? We are comparing the normal amoeba and the amoeba which is undergoing the binary fission. Okay, so let's see what is the shape. Here it is irregular shape. There it is somewhat elongated, right? And here we could find the cytoplasm intact and the pseudopodia are being present there. The cytoplasm division is being there. Here the nucleus is intact, single nucleus we can see. Here, there we could see the dividing nucleus. The nucleus is undergoing a division. And if we could take these points in a tabular format, let me explain you that as well. So we are comparing the normal amoeba and the amoeba which shows the binary fission. Let's see some of the features associated with both of them. In the normal amoeba, one single cell is there. The amoeba that shows the binary fission, there is single cell. But of course, what it is doing, it is dividing, it is showing binary fission, right? And we could find in that slide the amoeba which is showing the binary fission, one cell is dividing into two. So what will be the shape over here? Irregular shape. There it is like elongated, the constricted shape will be there, right? Here characterized by one nucleus. There the nucleus is dividing into two. The cytoplasm is uniform, intact, uniformly distributed, but their cytoplasmic division is also happening. The cytoplasm is being divided into two parts. Here the cell division is not seen in case of normal amoeba, but there the amoeba that shows the binary fission, of course we could find the cell division is happening and daughter cells are absent in this slide. Two daughter amoeba will be forming in which slide? In the one which shows the binary fission. Okay, so the amoeba, the normal amoeba is in non-reproductive stage, whereas the ones which is showing the binary fission, it is in reproductive stage. So this is what the difference we could see. And going to leishmania. In leishmania also, the binary fission happens. It is having a whip-like structure where the division happens, okay, and thereby the production of two daughter leishmania will be there. Whereas in case of the plasmodium, which is a malarial parasite, okay, there is a multiple fission. In binary fission, we could see single parent dividing into two, two daughter cells. Whereas in multiple fission, we could find multiple daughter cells are being produced. As you could see in the picture, there is a production of multiple daughter cells from a single plasmodium. So this is about the fission process. The first process, what is it? It is the process of the fission. Then moving on to the activity over here. Okay, up to now, the concept of binary fission is completed. Now we shall do one activity. What is that activity? We are going to collect the water from where? From pond or lake. Okay, so particularly sometimes we could see some ponds or lakes which will be looking very dark green. Huh? Yes. So they are characterized by presence of thread-like structures and mostly we will be seeing them as an algae. Now, what we have to do? We have to take one or two threads of these filaments. Like we can take these filaments and we are placing them on a glass slide. And now what we are going to observe? We are going to observe what are they and what kind of reproduction they are following. Okay, let me tell you what it is. We could see in that particular slide when we are collecting the water from pond or lake, we are seeing some thin thread-like structures. We are placing them on a slide and we will be able to find some long green threads and particularly being made of many small cells that are getting joined together. Okay, and these filaments, they are of an algae which is called as Spirogyra. And the speciality of this pyrogyra, if the spirogyra is breaking by any chance, fragments will be getting produced. Now, that fragment individually have the capacity for the production of a newer ones. The fragment will be getting generated into a newer organism. And this process of asexual reproduction is now being called as the process of fragmentation, and our spirogyra is showing this process. Okay, so students, listen what happens over here. This is the second mode of asexual reproduction we are discussing about. So what happens? The body of the organism, it is breaking into fragments. It can be any reason, any environmental, anything. Upon maturation, sometimes it is also showing the fragmentation so that the reproduction should happen. Okay, so each fragment is now growing into a new organism, and we could see this with respect to the spirogyra. So let's see the amazing spirogyra. It is a green thread-like structures which we are observing under the microscope. So when the parent spirogyra is breaking and giving the fragments out, each fragment is now having the capacity to develop into a newer organism. And remember, this happens only after the spirogyra is mature enough to have this fragmentation. Okay. Now, coming to the regeneration, which is the third method of asexual reproduction. Okay, let's take planaria as an example. So, when planaria, by any chance, if it has cut, if the body has cut, the cut fragments are now getting regenerated. For suppose if the head part is being cut from the rest of the body, from the head part, the fragment, we could see the rest of the body parts, they are being generated. If the tail part is being cut, from the tail part, the rest of the body is being generated. Like that, there is a regeneration of the parent organism. Since this is also involving only one single organism, we are going to place it under the asexual mode of reproduction. So what happens in regeneration? The fully developed living organisms, they will be able to generate newer individuals from where? From their own body parts. Okay, so if those organisms, not all the organisms are having this capacity, there should be some specific specialized cells. This is not possible with respect to large multicellular organisms like us. Can we regenerate? If the hand is cut, can the hand be regenerated into a whole human? No, na? That definitely is not possible. That's the reason presence of specialized cells make this happen and make the development to process further. Okay, so where it happens then, in which cases, in which examples, if we could take the hydra and planaria. If the body is being cut into pieces, each piece now has a capacity to grow and to regenerate and to give a complete organism. Okay, so this is the hydra. See, the hydra undergoes the regeneration, and this is the planaria. And we could see if any part is cut, from the cut part, we could find the generation of a newer individuals. In case of hydra, this is happening. In case of planaria, also that happens. The cut part again regenerating into a newer individuals. Okay, so now how the regeneration is going to happen? How? Now the question arises. Okay, we are discussing like this is happening, but the question is how this happens exactly. As I have told you, it is occurring with the help of special cells. And what do these cells do? They will be dividing quickly and they will be producing new cells. So, what does these new cells do now? They will be changing their form and they will be changing their function also. As a result, they are going to develop and they will be developing into different tissues and organs. so that the body can be restructured again and the body can be placed in a proper order. So there is a step by step change over here, and this is being called as a development. So in this way, with the help of special cells, the organism will be regenerating. So regeneration, there are some important points to note. As I have told you earlier, it is not the same as reproduction. Okay, most of the organisms, we can say they are having asexual mode of reproduction, but regeneration is not the asexual reproduction for most of the organisms. We cannot conclude it to be the same as reproduction, even though it is involving a single parent, because this is not confined to most of the organisms, right? So most of the organisms are not following method, they simply don't cut their bodies now. So that's the reason we cannot consider this. And what it helps with, it helps with repairing and replacing the lost body parts. Okay, now not in the regular reproduction, but since it is creating a newer individual, that's the reason we are going to call it as a asexual reproduction, but otherwise not. And this is not happening in most of the scenarios. Okay, you might have seen yeast undergoes budding, hydra also undergoes budding. Okay, so we could find in budding there is a development of a small outgrowth, we are going to call it as a bud. Where it develops on the parent, and later what happens, it is getting detached and is forming a new organism. For example, this is the parent, yeast. Let's take the example of yeast. A small outgrowth have been formed. So there is one more outgrowth. Later on, these buds get detached from the parent, and the buds will be leading into individual existence. They develop into the newer organisms. So this is the process of budding. We can see in hydra, this is hydra, the adult hydra. There is a small outgrowth being produced from the hydra, from the parent. And what this outgrowth is, this outgrowth is nothing but the bud. Okay, so from this growing bud, it undergoes a stage of maturation. Definitely it develops, it undergoes a stage of maturation. Now what happens, it gets detached from the parent and it gets landed and it develops into a new hydra. So there is a small activity over here to observe the yeast production. What we are doing, first initially we are dissolving the sugar in water, which is acting as a medium for the growth of the yeast. Now we are going for the addition of yeast to the solution. We shall plug this with a cotton and we are keeping it in a warm place. So after few days, we are taking this, we are placing a drop of this on a slide and we are observing under microscope. So what shall we observe? We shall observe the yeast and how it reproduces, how the bird growth will be there, how the bird gets detached, and how it is leading a new life. This is what we are going to see. So let me reiterate these steps once again as a point-wise manner according to the activity. So here observing the yeast culture, how we are doing? We are taking 10 grams of sugar in 100 ml of water. So from this we are definitely taking 20 ml of the solution and we are going for the addition of yeast. Now what we are doing? Into the mouth of the test tube, we are putting a cotton plug and we are letting it aside for 1 or 2 hours. After that, we are taking a drop of this and we are observing under the microscope. And what we will be able to see? We will be able to see the yeast undergoing the process of asexual reproduction, nothing but budding. So the parent yeast cell is seen initially. We can find a small outgrowth starts to develop from it, and the formation, the outgrowth of the bird, later on the detachment of the bird, the separation of the bird from the parent, and it is leading its individual life, the individual existence. So this is about the process of budding. Moving on, spore formation. Okay, so in moss and ferns, in rhizopus, in some of the fungus, we could find a spore formation. So we can see the spore formation in plants, fungus, and microorganisms. So why the spore formation is essential, sometimes the living organism, it should get adapted to the environmental or the climatic changes. If the environment conditions are not favorable, the spores will be remaining in a dormant stage for a while, and they get activated upon the favorable conditions, and they give rise to a newer generations when all the favorable conditions are there, when the climatic conditions are cooperating with it, and when they have landed onto a suitable surface. So the same happens over here. The parent living organism, it is going to produce many reproductive units, and particularly this should be lightweight. Why lightweight? Because they should get easily carried away by the wind. So there is a production of the spores by the parent organisms, and these spores are the reproductive unit. Remember, these are not the seeds, these are the spores which we are discussing under asexual only, single parent involvement. Okay, now if you could take an activity over here, growing mold on a bread. If you take this activity, we can take a bread, we can wet the slice of the bread, and we are going to keep it in cool dark place for a while. Then later on, what we can observe, imagine you have bought a bread packet with you, you have eaten half of it, you have you have removed half of it, and you have placed it aside for a while. So what happens when you left it out as such? After a few days, you just suddenly remember that you have left the bread over there. You went back, but that got spoiled. Why? Because there the fungus is acting, and there is a mold growth. We can definitely observe it with magnifying glass, and we will be able to see some small round shaped structures which are getting attached to a filament. Filamentous shaped structures with a globular head. So what are they? The rhizopus, the fungus showing the growth, okay, upon suitable substance. So the spore formation, where the reproductive units are being formed inside special structures which are called as a sporangia. So now what is the speciality of the spore? It is having thick protective wall, and this will be helping for the spore to survive unfavorable conditions. It can be anything, it can be lack of water, it can be temperature extremities, it can be shortage of food, it can be anything. So we can see the spore formation, it is also a mode of asexual reproduction. Okay. Now, if you could observe the sporangia which are producing the spores, these are the sporangia, the globular head-like structures which will be producing the spores, and the mold that is growing on the bread is nothing but the rhizopus, the fungus, the bread mold. Okay, so this is going to produce, the sporangium is going to produce the spores. The spores are with a thick protective outer wall, and whenever the conditions are favorable, the spore is going to germinate. It lands on a suitable surface, and it is going to show the germination, and it is going to have the reproduction. Why the spore formation is essential? Because it is reproducing in large numbers. It is easily spread through air since it is lightweight. Through water spreading also, it is really very easy, and it will be able to survive in harsh conditions. When the conditions are favorable, there is a production of a newer organism by the germination of that particular spore. So we can see with respect to the fungus, the rhizopus, we can see moss and ferns. They will be producing the spores underneath the leaf surface. We could find the presence of the spores. So they also reproduce by the spore formation. Okay. So the spore formation, when the conditions are being favorable, like when good amount of warmth, when nutrients are good, when adequate moisture is there, the spore is germinating and a new organism is arising. So the spore formation, what it helps the organism, as I have told you earlier, the spore formation is helping the organism for showing the reproduction. in large numbers, and it is very easily spread through what? Through air or water, and it will be able to survive in the harsh environmental or the climatic conditions. So what are the examples of it? Can you all reiterate? Fungus, the rhizopus bread mold is an example of fungus. Moss and ferns, all they will be having the spore formation as a mode of asexual reproduction. Now, moving on to the vegetative propagation. So far we have been seeing all the concepts under the smaller organism, small level of organization, right? Now, let's go for a big one, the plants. The plants are also showing the asexual reproduction. Remember, they show the sexual reproduction. But apart from that, there are some plants which show asexual reproduction, which is also called as the vegetative propagation. So, what is vegetative propagation? It is a type of asexual reproduction where the plants are growing from the vegetative parts. So, what are the vegetative parts? Like root, stem, leaf of the parent plant. So instead of getting reproduced through the seeds, there is a production of a newer living organism from vegetative part. Okay, let's go back to the basic concepts again. In your previous grades, you have learned plant consists of two parts: vegetative part, reproductive part. Vegetative part include stem, leaf, roots, and reproductive part include the flower, the fruit, right? So the root, stem, and the leaf being the vegetative part of the plant. If the daughter plants, we can say, if a new plant is arising from this, we are going to call it as a vegetative propagation, and it is involving single parent. There is no fusion of gametes, no fertilization. Hence, we cannot put this vegetative propagation under sexual reproduction. We are putting it only under asexual reproduction. So this vegetative propagation is of two kinds. One, nature favors it. Second, we, the humans, we generally have these agriculture practices, right? So we will be doing it. So what are the vegetative propagation types? One is the natural method. Second one is the artificial method. Okay, natural method and the artificial method. Coming to the natural vegetative propagation, it can be by root, by stem, or by leaf, any of the vegetative part. If it is by roots, the sweet potato, thalia, we are having them as an example. If it is by the stem, okay, potatoes. Remember, potato, sweet potato is different. I hope you all know, right? So sweet potato, we generally boil it. We eat it because it is sweetish, a bit in nature. Whereas the potato, the modified stem, the potato, we prepare it as curries, na? Okay, that does not matter. Now, coming to the natural vegetative propagation by stem, the potato tubers and ginger, the rhizomes of ginger, the modified stem. Ginger is also a modified stem. In case of onions, it is the bulbs, the strawberry, the runner. There is a vegetative propagation by leaf. If you could take the leaf, bryophyllum. Bryophyllum leaf will be having small little notches from where there will be production of a newer plants if the surface is touching the land and if conditions are probable for reproduction to happen, asexual reproduction. Okay, now vegetative reproduction. Vegetative propagation, as I have been telling you, it is of two kinds. One is the natural method, second one is the artificial method. Natural vegetative propagation and artificial vegetative propagation. So, natural vegetative propagation, as I have told you earlier, through different vegetative paths, it is happening. If it is by roots, sweet potato and thalia. If it is by stem, potato, we have seen the tubers of potato, rhizomes of ginger, bulbs of onions, and runners of strawberries. All these are good examples. The bryophyllum. The birds are growing from the leaf margins with respect to bryophyllum, and this serves the purpose for vegetative propagation. Now, moving on. a small activity over here in order to check regarding the vegetative propagation. You might have potatoes in your homes now. Definitely. Now, take a potato. Huh? Before taking, please ask the permission of your elders. Otherwise, they may scold us no, for taking the potato. Tell them specifically you are using that for performing an experiment. Don't tell like you are wasting it. Okay, definitely they are also going to help you. And anytime if you are doing any kind of experiment, please do under the supervision of your elders. Yes. So now what we have to do? We have to take a potato. We are cutting the potato into pieces, so we are ensuring that there will be a small birds, right? There will be small notches on the potato. So we are ensuring that some pieces are having the notches and some pieces are not having these notches. We have to cut it in such way. Use some tactica. Now, what we are doing? We are taking a tray, very nice tray. We will be taking cotton, wet the cotton, place the cotton on the tray and place the cut pieces on this cotton. Okay, just observe that the cotton is remaining moist all the time. After few days, what you will be observing? Imagine after few days what you can observe. The portions which have the knots will be giving a small branches over here. The portions which does not have the notches, which does not have the buds, the eye like scars on the potato, which do not have that thing, they are not going to produce anything. By this we can say the potato undergoes a vegetative propagation, and particularly the modified stem, nothing but the potato is being responsible, the buds being present on the surface are responsible for this reproduction. Now, in the similar scenario, let's take a money plant. Okay, let's take the propagation in a money plant. Initially, what we can do, take the money plant, cut with a leaf and a nod. A nod should be there, definitely. Small, bumpy portion will be there. No? So, that portion should be there. Secondly, take the internode, don't cut it along the node. Ensure that you are taking in such a way that there should not be any presence of any node in it. So take the portion between the internode, cut it, place like this. After few days, what you can observe, you can see the one with the leaf develops like this, gives out the branchings, gives out the root system, shoot system. But the one between the internodes which are not having any node, it is not going to develop any branchings. So only cuttings that are having the nodes, they are growing and they are producing the fresh leaves. Okay, from this we can see the vegetative propagation occurs over here, and that too the nodes are helping. If no nodes, no vegetative propagation, particularly in case of money plant. And apart from these students, we have various artificial propagation methods. Artificial vegetative propagation is also there, like the human made, the man made. In that, we have the cutting, layering, and grafting. Apart from that, one more thing which have been developing is the tissue culture. So, cutting we can see in case of rose and sugarcane, and layering with respect to jasmine, grafting the mango and apples, they can be grafted, right? And the tissue cultures can also be seen where the small part of the parent, the cells or the tissues are being taken, they are being grown in an artificial cultured media. We get the callus, the organized mass, and the callus is now differentiated, and we get a baby plant. The baby plant we are growing in a particular climatic conditions, the land suitable, proper fertile land, we can see it is growing into a independent individual plant. Okay, so artificial vegetative propagation is done by whom? We humans are doing it to grow the plants with desired qualities. It can be cutting, layering, or grafting. Cutting with respect to rose or sugarcane, layering with respect to jasmine, and grafting with respect to mangoes and apples. And finally, the tissue culture, bananas and orchids, which shall follow the tissue culture. And what shall be the importance of vegetative propagation? There is, of course, production of new plants very quickly when compared with that of sexual reproduction. Okay, so useful for plants, and particularly those are not having viable seeds in them. This really helps them. Okay, so for the maintenance of desirable traits of the plants, because from the parent the identical offspring is being produced, there is no fusion, no fertilization, and no involvement of gametes, so there are less chances of variation, which favors the desirable traits of the plant to be carried forward to the generations. And there is uniformity in the growth of the crops. Okay, now coming to the tissue culture, I shall have a glance of the tissue culture just a bit. So tissue culture, it is growing of plants from a small piece of a plant in a laboratory conditions. So what we are doing over here, from small piece of plant, we are taking, the piece is generally being taken from the growing tip, and we are keeping it in a nutrient medium which is enriched with all the essential nutrients. So now what happens? The cells are going to divide quickly, and they will be giving a mass of tissue which is called as callus. So callus, it is a group of cells which is being produced. Now the callus grows, the callus gives out a baby plant. The callus being moved with the another medium. Now what happens, and that too this medium consists of hormones. The presence of hormones will be initiating the root and the shoot formation. Now we could see small baby plants being produced. The plantlets are transferred to the soil so that they will be now grown into the full plants. Okay, so this is about the tissue culture, where from the growing tip a small part, a small cell or a tissue is being taken, grown in a suitable medium. Now the medium is enriched with hormones which favors the production of root and shoot. The small plantlet, baby plantlet is going to produce the baby plantlet. We are going to keep it in a suitable soil conditions, okay, so that it gives rise to a newer individual. This is about the tissue culture. Okay, to the sexual reproduction. As in case of asexual, we have seen single parent involvement, but in case of sexual reproduction, there will be involvement of two different parents, the male and the female parent. So from the male and the female parent, male and the female gametes are going to get formed, and these will be fusing together. So the fusion of male and the female gamete, we are going to call it as a fertilization, and there is a formation of the zygote. The zygote eventually develops into embryo, and if it is a human child, the embryo into the fetal stages, and further developmental stages will be there, right? So the embryo gets developed into a newer individual, and because this is involving the gametes from two different parents, there are high chances of variation within the offspring, and because of which it also helps in the evolution of the species. So mostly we can say the flowering plants and human beings, animals, all these will be coming under the ones which follow the sexual mode of reproduction. So let's get started taking the plants and as an example, particularly the flowering plants. So before we move on, I just wanted to check the chat for any question. If any question, let's get the discussion of that question. Okay. So there is a question that says organisms that reproduce sexually survive better than those that reproduce asexually. Wow, that's fantastic. Just now we have been discussing now. Sexual reproduction leads to the occurrence of variations, and variations will be enhancing the survival of living, the chances of survival, the chances of living. So variations, what they do, they make the living organisms to get adapted to different vivid climatic conditions. Okay, and harsh climatic conditions also the living organism will be able to withstand, and diseases occurrence of disease also will be there now. The living organism will be able to withstand such criteria also. So what the sexual reproduction will be advantageous, how it is helping with respect to the asexual when we are comparing, how it is helping means the sexual reproduction, since it is having a greater diversity, a greater chances for variation. The variation helps to cope up with the harsh climatic conditions, or they will be eventually coping with the adaptation to different climatic conditions or environmental situations or anything it can be. Okay, so that's the reason, because of variation this will be very helpful. Okay, so now moving on, the sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Flowering plants, so beautiful colorful flowers, they are the reproductive parts of a plant, and they will be further having the four parts inside them. What are they? The sepals, the petals. Sepals, they will be protecting the flower during the birth stage. They act as a outer protective coverings. The petals, which are very vibrant, which are very colorful, are responsible for attracting the insect pollinators. The vibrant colors will be there, right? And then coming to the reproductive part, the original reproductive parts will be the stamen as well as the pistil. So the stamen is the male part, and what it comprises of? The anther and the filament. Next, what else we have? The pistil, comprising of the stigma, style and the ovary. It constitutes the female part. So they are responsible for the fusion to occur. They produces the male and female gamete respectively, and fusion of male and female gametes will be occurring, thereby zygote, and zygote will be eventually developing, giving the seed formation. Okay, we shall be understanding about these concepts only. So the male reproductive part, let's take the parts one after the other, then let's understand about the fertilization or the process of fusion. So the male reproductive part, that is the stamen, it comprises of anther and filament. Anther is the one which is bilobed, and the anther produces the pollen grains, the yellowish powdery substance. When we touch the flower, the yellowish powdery substance which gets stick to our hands will be the pollen grain. So each pollen grain, it is going to contain the male germ cell, or we can call it as a male gamete. Okay, and now moving on, the female reproductive part, that is the pistil. The pistil, being the center of the flower, have three parts. What are they? The uppermost stigma, which is very sticky because it should receive the pollen grain, and particularly the pollen tube formation should be there, the stigma. Next, the style, the middle long tube, hollow tube like part will be the style, and through this style only the pollen tube moves and it reaches to the third part. This is nothing but the ovary, which is the swollen base at the bottom, and this is characterized by containing ovule, inside which there is a presence of a female gamete, nothing but the egg cell. Okay, anther produces the pollen grains, which is a part of stamen, the male part, and inside the pistil, the ovary, the basal part will be there, inside which there will be presence of ovules. The ovules have the egg cells. Now, coming to the types of flowers. Generally, there are two categories of flowers, unisexual flower and bisexual flower. Not all the flowers are going to contain all the four parts intact. There will be some parts missing. Okay, if the male part is missing, the female flower we call it as, and if the female part is missing, we call it as a male flower. Most of the times we might have heard it, right? And in the scientific terms, we are going to understand it in the terms of unisexual or bisexual terms. Okay, so the type of flower, a unisexual flower, it is going to contain either stamen or the pistil, like in case of papaya or the watermelon. Whereas the bisexual flowers are characterized by both the male and the female parts, like hibiscus, mustards, and many examples we have. Okay, so now the male part, the female part, they are producing the gametes. The gametes should reach each other. The male gamete should get traveled to the female part. And now what helps in this will be the process of pollination, where there is a transfer of pollen grains from the male part to the female part. So the pollen grains being produced where within the male part. Okay, the pollen is having any insect pollinator. Pollinating agents will be there. It can be wind, it can be water, it can be insects, it can be anything, it can be animals also. Okay, so the pollinating agents will be responsible for the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to whom? To the stigma. It can be of same flower or another flower, and it can be of two different plants, but both should belong to the same species. Okay, so the pollen now falls onto the stigma. From the stigma, there is a pollen tube production. The male germ cell, the male gamete, now reaches the ovary. Ovary have ovule. Inside ovule, who is there? Egg cell will be there. Okay. So the female gamete, not the male gamete, female gamete gets fused. Fertilization is happening. So the pollination is of two types. What are they? As you all know, the self-pollination and the cross-pollination. So self-pollination is the transfer of pollen to the stigma of the same flower. The same flower is being employed, whereas the cross-pollination is the transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma of another flower, but both of them belong to the same species. So the pollination can be carried by any agent. It can be wind, it can be water, it can be insect, animals, birds, it can be anything. Now, what happens over here? This will be very, very interesting. Now, there is a process of fusion. So, onto the stigma, the pollen grain is falling. Now, the pollen grain should travel up to the region of ovary. So with the help of pollen tube, it is reaching the ovary. Inside ovary, who is there? There is ovule. And what does ovule consist of? Ovule consists of egg cells. So the middle one over here is egg cell. Okay. Just don't get into the consideration of all the other parts. All the other parts are like synergids, antipodal, polar nuclei, which ensures the triple fusion. That is completely different. Okay, as of now, just focus on this egg cell. Now, what happens? The male gamete, the female gamete fuses together, and there is a production of zygote after fertilization. So, after reaching the stigma, the pollen grain is going to form a pollen tube. Through the style, the pollen tube is moving, and where it is reaching? It is reaching the ovary. Now what happens? The male gamete fuses with the egg cell, and we are going to call this as fertilization, which results in the formation of zygote. So now tell me, understand what will be the fate of this zygote? What should happen to the zygote now? It should develop now. Now we can see the zygote is dividing and developing into embryo. Now occurs the formation of the seed and the fruit. The ovule becomes seed and the ovary matures, ripens and develops into fruit. So then what is the fate of other parts? Petals are there, sepals are there. What about them? What about the style? What about the stigma? What about the anther filament? What are the things that are happening to them? Means they simply dry and they will be getting fall off from this. So that is the reason we have fruit, inside the fruit, ovule. Okay, ovule will be becoming a seed. We have seen that. So ovary, inside the ovary, ovule will be there. Ovary develops into fruit and ovule is now developing into seed. Yes, so now the fertilization process is complete. Now you can ask me a question. Ma'am, you are telling the fertilization is complete, but from where the newer organism is arising, the newer plant? From where? Of course, for the development of a newer individual plant, the seed should germinate now. The seed, now it is falling on the ground. It can be many reasons. We sometimes eat the fruit, we throw the seeds away. From the seed, a new plant arises, right? Sometimes there might be some insects, water, wind that favors the seed germination, the seed movement, the seed dispersal, we call it as. Okay, so the seed dispersal is being favored by many things, and when they are landing in suitable favorable climatic conditions in a suitable particular soil, they will be germinating, undergoing the process of germination. So germination is where the seed that contains the embryo gets developed into a new plant under suitable conditions of munchy soil. Like there should be good soil, there should be water, air, and enough warmth also. So this process of seed growth into a seedling being called as a germination. Okay, we can also observe germination. We can do a small activity to observe the germination. Since you are fifth grade, you are aware of this activity that you are aware of. So you are taking a bowl, you soak a few Bengal gram seeds overnight. Next day, what you are doing? You are draining the water and covering the seeds with a wet cloth. You could say small, little sprouts, right? When you are leaving for a day. And we need to ensure that the seeds should be always kept moist. Okay. And now the seeds will be germinating. Use small, cute little sprouts. Now we are going to cut them and we are looking at different parts. We are now understanding about the germination of Bengal gram seeds. So how does this look now? Let me show you. This looks, when we are cutting this look like this only. Okay, cotyledon, which is serving as a food storage organ for the seed, and there is a plumule over here which develops into the shoot system in future. That's why we are calling it as a future shoot. And there is a radical at the bottom which is the future root. So this is about the concept of sexual reproduction with respect to the flowering plants by the formation of the seed. In asexual reproduction, we have seen vegetative propagation. There, the vegetative part, stem, leaf, or one more thing. What is that? Stem, leaf, or root. It will be playing a very important role for the production of a newer organism. Here, it is with the help of the seeds. So, in human being also, we could see there is a involvement of two parents, the male and the female parent. Thereby, there is a production of the male gamete and the female gamete. There is a fusion of the male and the female gamete, which we are calling it as a fertilization. And after the fertilization, zygote forms. There is a production of zygote. Zygote eventually gets converted into embryo, embryo into the fetal developmental stages, and yes, there is a birth of an infant, right? Now, if you could see, there are certain changes which favors reaching the age of adolescence, reaching the age of reproductive maturity, okay, attaining puberty. So adolescence is where there is a period between a childhood and adulthood where there are some sexual maturation changes that will be happening in a person's body. There will be development of secondary sexual characters also. So adolescence is where the changes occur during the human phase, a cycle in human phase. It is between the childhood and attainment of complete adulthood. So what happens over here? There are certain changes during adolescence, which is there are certain changes which is common for both boys and girls. There are changes only with respect to the specific gender as well. So let's first discuss the ones that are common in both boys and girls. Like in armpit region, there is a growth of hair. Around the genital region also, there is a growth of hair. The darkening of the skin within the genital and the armpit regions shall be there during the adolescence. Hair shall appear on arms and legs and sometimes the face even. And during the adolescent stage only, na, the face becomes so oily, pimples will be developing. Every time we'll be complaining of pimple development, acne development, na? Because there is an excessive secretion of the sweat and the sebaceous glands will be leading to that. Now, some changes might be common in both boys and girls. Some changes are different. What are they? In girls, there is an increase in breast size and there is a darkening of nipples and start of menstruation, the menstrual cycle. In case of boys, what will be the changes? Thick hair on the face, beards and mustaches, they starts developing, and the voice becomes deeper. Sometimes the voice even may crack. Okay, it is very common in case of adolescents ears, to not worry. And penis may sometimes become enlarged and yes, sometimes erect. So puberty is the attainment of sexual maturation. The body is undergoing some changes and puberty is the period during which the body is reaching the sexual maturation. So where that happens, it is particularly during the adolescence time only. The body will be showing the stages of maturation. The reproductive organs starts maturing. So what does this term indicate? What does the term stating reproductive organs start maturing means? Nothing but the testes of the male reproductive organs, they starts the production of the sperms, which are nothing but the male gametes, and the ovaries of the female reproductive system starts the production of the eggs. Okay, so what does these reproductive organs do? They will be allowing the body for the production of germ cells, the sperm cells and the ova, which are needed for the sexual reproduction. Now, coming to the male reproductive system, let's have a glance at the male and the female reproductive system also. So, the male reproductive system, it have two functions: the production of male germ cells, nothing but the sperms, and to transport the sperms to the site of fertilization. Where will be the site of the fertilization? Inside a female body. Now, coming to the male reproductive system, what does it basically have? A lot of parts, but we generally have the discussion of only few parts. The testis is the one where there is a production of the sperm. It is being located inside the scrotum, and the testis producing the sperms travel through the region of the vas deferens, and between the prostate glands the seminal vesicles will be there, which add up to their secretions of the sperm, creating semen. And there is an ejection of the sperm through the penis in the semen form. Through the penis there is an ejection, and at the top we could also find the ureters, the urinary bladder. Urethra being a common opening for both the urine as urine release as well as for the release of the sperm. Now, the testis. The testis is where there is a production of the sperms and they are being located in a scrotal pouches, in a pouch-like structure outside the body, outside the abdominal cavity. The scrotum is the one that is harboring the testis. The testis will be responsible for the production of the sperm. Apart from the sperm production, it also helps the release of hormone testosterone. Now, what is the role of testosterone? Testosterone will be helpful for the sperm production and it is creating some changes during the puberty. Like, what are the changes it contribute for? Growth of facial hair, voice deepening will be there, reproductive organ development. All this will be contributed by the testosterone. Now, the transportation of the sperms. How the sperm transport is occurring means the sperm is moving through the testis. The testis is a site of the sperm production. So, there is a tube called as a vas deferens. The vas deferens is joining with the tube from the urinary bladder, and we can find the urethra acting as a common passage for both urine and the sperm. Okay, in the event of time when the sperm is traveling as such, it is undergoing a transformation like into the semen form. By the secretion of whom? By the secretion of the prostate gland and the seminal vesicles also. So what they are adding? They are adding the fluid to the sperm. So what does this fluid help with? The fluid is now responsible for the movement of the sperm, and they are also responsible for nourishing the sperm during this movement. And what we are going to call this mixture of sperms and the fluid to be? The semen. Okay, so now we have understood the male reproductive part. Now, coming to the structure of the sperm. This is how the sperm looks. The head, the midpiece and the tail. The tail heads in the swimming movement, and the head, the midpiece region will consist of mitochondria, which produces the energy for the movement of the sperm. The head part contains a nucleus. Okay, so the structure of sperm is that it contains a genetic material, and it will be having a long tail that helps for the swimming, so that it should reach the female reproductive part. Now moving on to the female reproductive part. What does the female reproductive part comprises of? It comprises of three parts. Okay. One is the ovary, second one is the fallopian tube, and third one is the uterus. Uterus opening, we can see the cervix as well as the vagina. Now, we could find the ovaries are the one which are responsible for the production of the egg, or nothing but the female gamete. Okay, so every month there is a production of egg, and if the egg is not fertilized, there is a shedding of the endometrial layer of the uterus. The middle thick region over here is, that is the endometrial layer. There is a shedding of the endometrial layer. Along with that, there is a blood and mucus being discharged. That is nothing but the menstruation if the egg is not fertilized. Okay, so generally what happens? There is an egg release from the ovary. Now, this egg, it will be reaching the fallopian tube. During the time of ovulation, this is happening. The fallopian tube, it is waiting for the entry of the sperm. If the sperm enters through this region, in the fallopian tube, there is a fusion of male and the female gametes. So fertilization occurs where? Fertilization occurs in the fallopian tube. Okay, now after fertilization, the zygote gets formed, right? The embryo stages should be formed, right? Now that will be getting embedded, that get traveled up over here, get embedded over here. So in order to embed, in order to have an implantation, this is called as implantation in scientific term. In order to board the developing embryo, the uterine inner lining will be becoming thick. Okay, so that it can implant, it can take up, it can have the helping hand in supporting the developing embryo if the egg is fertilized. If the egg is not fertilized, this thickening of endometrial is not required. Then we can see there is a shedding of the blood, the discharge of blood, endometrial layer and the mucus. Again, the endometrium in the next subsequent month it forms. This is a 28-day cycle, the menstrual cycle. Okay, in case of female. So what does the ovary do? The ovary produce the eggs which are nothing but the ova and the female hormones. Okay, so female hormones we have estrogen, progesterone. Progesterone helps in the maintenance of pregnancy. So oviducts, nothing but the fallopian tube. As I have told you, from the ovaries, the eggs are getting released, right? Now they are entering into the oviduct. Fallopian tube is considered as the site of fertilization. Okay, so now uterus. The two oviducts, they are joining together and they are opening into the uterus, right? Uterus, it is inverted pear-shaped structure. It is very strong, it is very elastic. It is opening through cervix into vagina. There is an opening of the uterus. So fertilization and development, how this is happening, how the fertilization is happening. The sperm, it travel up to the oviduct. Oviduct is the site of fertilization. So the sperm is fusing with the egg. Fertilization is occurring. Fertilized egg. Now what we are going to call it as? It is called as zygote. So the zygote undergoes cell division. It divides, it gives the embryo. Now, the embryo is getting attached to the uterine wall, which we call it as a implantation. After the implantation, we could see the fetal developmental stages. The embryo develops into the fetus. So the hands, limbs form, the cardiovascular system gets formed, right? So all the systems get eventually formed and the fetus will be formed. Okay, and this process where a mother is supporting a child's development, it is called as gestation, and this is the condition of the pregnancy. So placenta, during the time of pregnancy, who will be nourishing the baby? Means, of course, we can say the nutritious food reaching from the mother to the baby. There is a structure called as a placenta, which is a special tissue. The embryo is receiving the nutrition and oxygen through this special tissue. So what this placenta is doing, it is connecting the mother and the baby, the mother and the embryo, and there is a transfer of nutrients and oxygen to the baby. Apart from nutrients and oxygen transfer, there is waste being generated from the baby as well. So that waste should also be eliminated. Now, the placenta is being employed in removing the waste from where? From the baby into the mother's blood. Okay, so now we have seen what is happening over here with respect to the human reproduction. There is a sexual reproduction, the fusion of the male and the female gamete. Before I move on, let me check if any question. Okay, so a question: which one carries the information from parent to their children? Of course, from the parent to children, which one? The DNA, the genetic information is being carried with the help of DNA, deoxyribose nucleic acid. Okay, so it is carrying the genetic information, and particularly where we can find the DNA, we can find it in the chromosomes inside the nucleus, inside the chromosomes, we can find the DNA segments which are responsible for carrying the information, the genetic information to be in particular. Yes, so now we shall discuss regarding the reproductive health. Okay, students, if we could find when there is an attainment of sexual maturity during the adolescence period, we have seen this, right? During the puberty time, sometimes, you know, we could find there is a necessity for the proper care of the reproductive organs. Otherwise, there are chances for the occurrence of infections. So cleaning the reproductive organs, cleaning the private parts is very essential, a very essential parameter. And one more thing to remember, when there is an attainment of adulthood, okay, particularly according to the societal norms, marriage, getting the marriage age, getting married, then only after that only there is a process of production of offspring, right? Okay, so being dependent upon the individual societal norms and the choices of a person, the reproduction should happen. It's not like a particularly during the teenage years, it's not correct for a girl child to give production to the babies. No, 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 we cannot consider that things. Okay, so maintenance of proper reproductive health with all the full focus in mind, with the correct decision making capacity, then only we have to move forward for creating a newer individual. Okay, and if you could see over here, in order to prevent the occurrence of unwanted pregnancies, there are various methods instead of going for feticides. Okay, please do not go for feticides. We have to educate. There is a other method which stops the fertilization to happen, which stops the male and female gametes from reaching each other, and we can go for the barrier methods like the usage of condoms, and there is a utilization of intrauterine devices like copper T, and there is utilization of oral pills, of course they have side effects. Okay, and if at all if they are going for a family planning, they can go for vasectomy, tubectomy. Vasectomy is where the vas difference is blocked so that the sperms will not be entering And tubectomy is where the fallopian tube is being blocked in case of females. The fallopian tube is the site of fertilization, right? So the fertilization of the male and the female gamete is not happening like that. There are many methods to be followed in order to ensure that there should not be any unwanted pregnancies. Okay. And finally, we are at the end of session, and maintenance of reproductive health is very essential because sometimes there are chances for the occurrence of bacterial infections, viral infections like HIV, or bacterial infections like syphilis, gonorrhea might occur. So that's the reason it's really very important for an individual to follow the barrier methods, or any kind of contraceptive indications can be followed, and maintenance of reproductive health is equally essential. Okay, so let me check further if any questions, because we are at the end of today's discussion. Okay, a question saying male and female sex cells in humans and where they are being formed. Male sex cell, it is called as sperm, and female sex cell, it is called as a ova. Male sex cell is being formed, the male gamete being formed inside the testis, and the female ova is being formed inside the ovaries. Okay. Yes. So finally, we are at the end of today's discussion. And what was the concept that we have been discussing so far? We understood about the concept of reproduction, nothing but the production of a newer generation of the offsprings. We understood types of reproduction, the sexual reproduction and the asexual reproduction. Sexual involving two parents, asexual involving only single parent. So the mode of reproduction used by single organisms means single parent organisms. We have seen fission, we have seen regeneration, fragmentation, budding. We have got to understand the spore formation. Yes, the vegetative propagation also we have seen. So later on, we have understood certain activities related to asexual reproduction. Thereby, we understood sexual reproduction flowering plants, like half the fusion of male and female gamete is occurring, and then in human beings half the adolescence and puberty is getting attained. We understood about the male and the female reproductive system. Okay, so this is of today's discussion. I hope the concept was clear for you, and if you are having any kind of questions, or if you wanted to get connected with us, definitely feel free to get connected with us by the chat box or the comment section. Okay, so thank you so much, students. It's really fantastic and wonderful to have all of you in today's discussion. Keep learning the concepts. All the very best for your examinations. Thank you so much and have a great evening.